Everyone and their mother has a custom-made, hyper-specialized opinion on Sonic Frontiers lately. If you're anyone with even a tiny platform, you probably shout to the heavens about how it's either the best thing since McDonald's or the worst thing since McDonald's. Yeah, I'm not here to do that. If you want to know my opinions on it, I liked it, and I'm excited for the DLC, but this video isn't about my personal number out of 10 rating on the Funny Blue Rat game. It's about the undisputable fact that Sonic Frontiers had no choice but to succeed. Sonic's been doing great lately. It's gotten to the point where people are shouting Sonic Renaissance in the filthy streets of the internet. The comics are fantastic, and the two movies are pretty great, and its social media presence has never been greater. There were even a bunch of online shorts leading up to Frontiers launch, giving us some bonus lore and some neat character interactions that you wouldn't normally see. Even the mobile games are great. Sonic Dash is always a neat waste of time, and Speed Battle is both a fun game and the game with the most pathetic microtransaction system in the world. It's so pathetic you don't even need to do it to get characters. Forget the Twitter account. Sonic talked with a VTuber at least twice. Mario's never done that shit before. There's a big blue elephant in the room about all that good stuff though. About 90% of it was conceived after the launch of Sonic Forces, which was the single worst received Sonic game since '06. It certainly didn't help at all that all of its marketing kicked up a bunch of unnecessary and unwarranted hype. The games between Forces and Frontiers weren't doing particularly great either. While I'm a fan of Team Sonic Racing, it's no secret that it didn't do too well, and most people regard it as meh at best. Then we got the single worst re-release ever made in the form of a remake of the most critically beloved Sonic game ever made. I can't think of a worse ball to fumble, besides maybe failing the launch of the lauded original trilogy. Okay. Now, this wasn't a botched ROM collection. 3 of these games were made before, but S3K had to be remade from the ground up for a new engine. I honestly don't think it's anywhere near the worst Sonic game or even a bad collection, but that doesn't change the fact that the entire fucking internet hated this release. It was buggy, inaccurate, unnecessarily rushed to reach an arbitrary deadline, and had some extremely questionable monetization practices. Not helping matters at all was when Sega walked back the single coolest thing they ever did by removing the only legitimate way to obtain a free ROM of the older games, just so that people had no choice but to buy Origins. So yeah, in general, Sonic's been doing pretty fantastic. Except in the console games department, which is way more important to Sonic's image as a brand than nearly anything else. Sonic's a game first and a media empire second. If the games turn out bad, then people abandon the rest of it in droves. That leads us into Frontiers. All of this shit, all the comics, the mobile games, even the movies, it all leads to Frontiers. They all did exactly what they had to in order to attract new fans and yank back in old ones who gave up on the franchise. But the games they released in the meantime, they were a pretty terrible omen. If they couldn't even comfortably port old games that were already remade, then what chance did they have of making an open zone Sonic game? But even more dangerously, there was a classical phenomenon that grew worse and worse each generation until finally it crescendoed close to Sonic Frontiers' release. On the internet, hating Sonic is really cool. Not just hating Sonic either. Everyone has a complex set of reasons why they hate Sonic, an entire spectrum of opinions representing whatever their favorite YouTubers told them. Even if you've never played a Sonic game before, you probably have more complicated opinions on Sonic than anything else you've never properly interacted with, besides maybe US politics. And even then, if you don't have complicated opinions, it's likely that you at least know the cold hard golden rule of Sonic is bad, and its fans are even worse. You'd expect this to get better with all the extra non-game stuff that Sonic's been putting out lately, but no, it's only evolved the issue. The movies, the comics, these weren't good things, they were good despite being Sonic. High quality is something that's not just external from Sonic's identity, it's outright in opposition of it to your general layman. People enjoyed them despite Sonic being involved. If something's associated with Sonic, people will actively seek for ways to dislike it. This statement from Mudahar serves as a great example.
To be fair, I didn't expect the soundtrack for a Sonic game to be good, alright? But,
Less than 5 years ago, the only thing anybody would ever afford Sonic was that it had good music, but now even that's been taken away from its core identity in the public consciousness, because quality is entirely alien from Sonic. Everybody knows that. Not even Sonic fans like Sonic, right? They all have to make their own games that show up Sega, because a Sonic game has never been good.
I think we're at the point where we need to admit that this was never really a great franchise. Nope. And that we keep trying to find this thing that was never really actually there.
Sonic was never good.
Yeah,
it was a 25-year lie.
Yes.
Now imagine you're Takashi Iizuka. All of this pressure has been piled up on you from both the internet and your higher-ups. The fans have been slandering your name over the internet for some really questionable lore and writing decisions you've been making. All they want is for you to go back to the good old days where Sonic was 2D, but also 3D, but also just like Generations, but also they want you to make Adventure 3, but also they want you to make your fanfictions real. You've been trying to sate their desires year after year, and every time it falls flat. The last time you tried to give them what they wanted, you gave them Sonic Forces, a game with a Sonic-y aesthetic that lets you boost like in Generations, gives you platforming and bonus playstyles like an Adventure, throws in classical 2D gameplay like the Golden Age, and attempts a darker and edgier story like the mid-2000s era. And to answer that call, Forces failed at delivering every single aspect of those promises. The extra playstyles of the Avatar are meaningless. The boost gameplay is unrewarding. The 2D gameplay is downright broken. In the story, it pretends to be a wartime narrative, but it plays out like a wet fart, a budgeted roller coaster of build-up leading to flaccid anticlimaxes. It's a slow burn story that lasts under 2 hours and does nothing but screw up the world's established lore, assassinate characterizations, and set up for the really good comics. You cannot deliver what the people want. You haven't been able to for years. That haunting specter, that damned 06, holds back the creativity of both you and the franchise you've been cursed to helm. And if you fail again this time, the whole world will be audience to your grand mistake. So you take a necessary risk. You don't focus on what the fans want. You swallow your pride, hire someone better to write your story, and try something completely different. You can't make what they want, so you make what you want. And you do it with passion. Iizuka had to fight tooth and nail to get an extra year of development squeezed in. He got his wish and focused all of his efforts on making sure this game would turn out great. The multimedia presence was taken advantage of, with the comic's most famous writer being put on board, sketches being written up to lead into the game, and an animated prequel being distributed to the internet. What worked for the movies was focused on for characterization where appropriate. The fan service seen in the mobile games was considered for the lore. Every single part of this game was carefully considered. If it was to be the main act in Sonic's brand new image, it had to be the capstone for it all. And then the world first saw it. Sonic Frontiers' first gameplay trailer. And they hated it. Sonic looked slow, the puzzles looked boring, the combat looked repetitive, the environments looked bland. The majority of people online, it was justification for the identity that they had seared into their minds. Sonic has never been good. Now, if you had any kind of rationality, you could have reasoned a couple of these complaints away. The worlds looked empty because they were empty places in a short showcase video. Sonic was slow because obviously the player was mindlessly tilting the analog stick. The puzzles would get harder, the enemies would get more interesting, the environments would change. It's just what's naturally expected of a game. The video only showed a few small parts at the opening level. But remember, it's fun to hate Sonic, and to have complicated opinions about why you hate Sonic. And in an era where Sega was infuriatingly tight-lipped about Frontiers, if you weren't keeping up with the leaks, then all you could do was speculate. And when you speculate, it's easy to build grand mythologies and narratives. By the end of the month, all we had were people writing video essays on how Sonic Frontiers was destined to be terrible because of reasons they fabricated. People got it in their heads that Sonic couldn't go any faster, that the boost was either gone or somehow overpowered, that combat would only ever be the psi loop, or that the whole game would only be force and ruins. No, that last part's only half true. And then it happened. The game released. Now, even around the launch window, not a lot of kind words were said. If you were a journalist or YouTuber where you got the game early, there was about a 40% chance that you had some scathing words for the game. But in the end, the sales and the public reception would be what determined the game's fate, and the final reception was... it's pretty good, despite being a Sonic game, which was more than enough, because it was the best rating a Sonic game has gotten since generations. It put non-fans and huge internet influencers in a position where they liked a good chunk of what they were playing, and they were able to eke out some very painful words of approval. There's a wild slurry of opinions on what parts of the game are good and bad, and for every person who liked part of the game, you'll find just as many people who hated it. But no matter what angle they came at it from, they all ended up at the same final conclusion. This is what Sonic should be going forwards. They just need to polish it, add more stuff, and fix some issues. Misako was right, and Sonic Frontiers succeeded. One way or another, it succeeded despite it all. It had no choice but to succeed, because too much was riding on its success. It's downright motivational, and you can feel that passion, that acknowledgement of the torch it bears in the very game itself. Even the name of the game, Sonic Frontiers, imparts an image of embracing a new horizon and exploring uncharted territory. The time for wallowing about in the past, kicking itself for its mistakes, and desperately trying to recapture the glory days is gone. Sonic's fully prepared to embrace a new identity. And that plays a large part in the story. Eggman learns to accept his new role as a father. Amy and Tails choose to split off from Sonic for a while in order to become champions of their own adventures. Knuckles gains the courage to finally move on past the Master Emerald and rely on his friends every now and then, so that he can enjoy more of the world. Even the Cocos are trying to move on past their old pre-mortem grudges, only truly being freed once they've been freed of their final moments. You can hear it in the songs as well. Nearly every single song is some deeply motivated power ballad about how the singer won't back down from their fate or let the obstacles in their path slow them down. Undefeatable is a cry out to the doubts that they could ever succeed. Find Your Flame is all about how they'll find their purpose in the world no matter what they run into. Break Through It All is an angry cry to the heavens, vengefully declaring war on the notion that they need to compromise in order to succeed, angrily asserting that their best has yet to even be seen. I'm Here is probably the most relevant of them all, a triumphant, heroic declaration of their presence, moving on from old scars and embracing a new future that they've been preparing to embrace their whole life. Sonic Frontiers' core identity is the unbridled necessity of success. It knows that it had no choice but to win in any way possible, and it would work hard to manifest that reality into being, even if it had to do it in a way that only Sonic as a franchise could. The most recent Game Awards had a Player's Choice Award that ended up being a head-to-head 50-50 duel between Genshin Impact and Sonic Frontiers. And while the results of that are controversial, it's undeniable that Sonic didn't end up winning. But it's also undeniable that Sonic ended up beating out Elden Ring by a landslide. The fact that Frontiers even got onto that stage and had so much passionate support behind it is iconic towards what it stands for. Even its second place standing is perfect, because Sonic isn't a franchise that's perfect, just one people love and adore. Frontiers succeeded and answered the call it was given with a triumphant sound, even if it wasn't a flawless victory. The energy of Frontiers is a rebellious and perfect victory, and people resonated with that energy on an emotional level. Sonic Frontiers had no choice but to succeed, so it succeeded. All we can do now is anxiously await whatever future this victory has carved out for the franchise. And read the comics. That was my second video essay. I planned to release it a lot earlier, but some stuff got in the way, so yeah, I kind of ended up having to make it a bit late. Sorry about that. Still, I hope you all enjoyed it. You'll notice that the content of this one was pretty different from the last video, and that's because I have a lot of complicated opinions on video games, and I plan to tell you all about them as much as I can. So if you're excited to see those new opinions, either subscribe to see the next episode next week, or watch the previous one, because that thing needs the interaction. Ideally, you'll do both. Also, shoutouts to New Face for being my first donator on Ko-Fi. I am in a position where I really need the monetary support, and I would like your help if possible. So if you could donate just $1 one time to my Ko-Fi account, I would be very grateful. And that's it. See you all next week.